Hi, you remember us? We used to be on the internet a long time ago.
Yeah, so I don't know how shoot the shit this will end up being, but let's just have a little chat, you know? I feel like we just had the holiday season, so you spent time with your Mormon family, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a good time for reflection and to think about the journey that you've been
Yeah,
on.
a new year, another cycle around the sun.
Yeah. Well, a question for you that maybe we can start out with that I know is like a hot topic for ex-Mormons is how you feel now spending time with believing family versus when you first left the church. Because I feel like for me it was very hard to be around believers in the beginning because obviously you're healing from the trauma of the church, and so being around people who are representatives of that church can be hard. But how have you navigated that? Because as someone who loves your family and wants them in your life.
Yeah, this is definitely a big concern for, I think, most people leaving the church because the family is the central part of the church's plan. I don't know about God's plan, but certainly the churches, they want you to get married as soon as possible, start pumping out kids as soon as possible, so that you can stay really busy doing church stuff for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And people who leave the church, it's such a terrifying thing to think, hey, I don't get to see my family in eternity. Maybe I die, maybe that's it. Maybe I don't go to the same kingdom or something. And then just here in the mortal temporal realm, I feel distance. I feel cut off from my family because they're Mormon. They believe these things. They expect these certain behaviors that I just can't participate in. So it's very terrifying leaving the church and thinking about how to navigate with family. And we've talked about this before, how it's one of our most basic impulses as primates to want to be in close connection with people who are like us, the people who are closest to us. Our familial bonds are so strong, and we want to have that validation from our parents, from our siblings, whoever, our extended familial networks. And when that's cut off, it feels like dying because we don't know how to relate to ourselves as disconnected from the people around us. So it's a big part of reassessing and re-understanding ourselves, our relationship to our families, to our larger community, et cetera, et cetera. So very scary. And of course, it's one of the biggest questions that we always get is how to deal with family. I love something that Lindsay Hansen Park, who is behind the Year of Polygamy podcast and just a great person overall, she recently made a post that was like, in all my time in and out of the church, I've learned to have a little bit of, I don't remember her exact verbiage, but essentially like leave some room for things to grow and change in regard to relationships. When you first leave the church, it's traumatic for you first and foremost. There's no doubt about that. But in a sense, it is traumatic for the people who are witnessing you leave because it is part, somewhat undermining their sense of identity and purpose and relationship to the world. And in their mind, this something terrible is happening. I remember when I got news in the MTC that a friend had left the church, and I just cried and cried and cried for so long because it was like terrible. No, this is the worst thing you can do, and it's not their fault that they're reacting that way. That's the way they've been conditioned to react.
It's tough because like you the traumatized person from leaving an abusive organization, what I would consider an abusive organization. In an ideal world, you wouldn't have to be the one feeling sort of like responsible for the feelings of the people that are still participating in it. But yeah, the reality is that, like, not that you have to be responsible for example, your parents' feelings, but having recognizing that it's not personal if they reject you, essentially, because you're asking them to. It's so threatening to their core self, right? And like we all know that one of the reasons the church is so harmful is because it does co-opt the family, and so then your sense of family is tied up with your participation in the church. So even though, the healthier thing would be if your bonds with family members are always more important than like what religious beliefs people have. Like that's not the reality in Mormonism. So yeah, leaving room for, it's like a bomb goes off, and like both people are suddenly left with this massive thing they have to figure out how to heal from and navigate. And if you grew up in the church, you're primed since birth to see it as a us versus them thing. Like when you leave the church, you immediately do become them. And that, so I feel like a lot of the time it's the way that family members will react right off the bat is just sort of like what their lifetime of conditioning thus far has sort of trained them to do. But then as the living reality of you not being a member kind of unfolds more and more, there's more room for them to see things in a new light, see you in a new light, maybe soften their hearts. I know this isn't the case for everyone, and I'm sorry if it's not, but a lot of the time I do feel like, well, time can be a valuable healer.
Yeah.
I say that with caveats.
Yeah. Because initially, it's hard to expect like a perfectly peaceful transition out of the church and everyone's just going to be fine and you can have really adult conversations and explain yourself. And your hope is that your community, who professes to care so much about all this stuff, will be interested in hearing about it and understanding your relationship and, following their Christ-like commitment to mourn with those that mourn and to comfort those who stand in need of comfort and all that. And the reality is that usually that's not what happens. People don't want to hear about, your thoughts on Mormonism. They don't want to hear about the things you've discovered, and they're not interested in mourning with you in this process. And that just feels like the ultimate rejection. And there can be a lot of conflict and a lot of hard words. And very appropriately, boundaries may need to be set. It's okay to put some intentional and pronounced distance between someone for both of your sakes, to say, okay, whatever dynamic we have right now, it is not eliciting good feelings between us, not conducive to either of our mental healths, so why don't we take a step back? And, like I said, that may be totally necessary. And even if it's not so dramatic as being like, hey, you're cut off from my life for the time being, there oftentimes just needs to be some distance allowed for some individuation of you learning who you are outside of this system.
Yeah, and if you're constantly still getting feedback from the toxic system you've left, then I think it's going to be harder to do that. Because it's like, that's the hallmark of a high demand religion or cult, right? Is that when you try and leave, you're rejected by the people who you need the most because you're grieving. And it's like you're having to grieve the loss of your God and your worldview, and that alone is absolutely enormous. But then you kind of do have to grieve the loss of family relationships, if only for a time, because a lot of the time it does become quickly apparent when you tell your parents you're leaving the church or whatever, like, oh, our relationship is fundamentally different now. They will not accept me in the same way. They don't want to listen to my truth or, my thoughts and experiences. Like, my reality is fundamentally threatening to them, so they need to mischaracterize me as a liar. Or like there's some comfort in sort of knowing that that's like normal, in that like that's the deal with high demand religions and cults, Mormonism, plenty others. So again, like, it's not personal. It's not like your parents just don't love you enough, or I don't know, is that even a thing that I feel like I would feel that way? Like, even if I didn't consciously think it, it's when you're trying to tell your parents, I've gone through this really traumatic thing that does implicate you guys too. Can you listen to me? And they're like, we won't listen to you, and we think that you're a bad person now. God, I mean, that's just like some fundamental trauma, like that's just like base level rejection from your parents. I just can't imagine how hard that must be.
Yeah, and it's one thing to be rejected. It's a whole other thing to be like actually maligned and slandered.
Yeah.
Not just you have your beliefs and live and let live, but like, you must be a bad person. You must be doing something wrong. You weren't good enough. You broke this and this commandment, or whatever narrative people have to say to justify your exit from the church.
And I do feel like people like you with Mormon families who grew up in the church, you kind of do have to decide, and not right away and not in any one single moment, and you're allowed to like play around, but like you have to decide if it's worth it to you to try and like bust those narratives. And I'm not saying it's healthy to, go in with this mission to like, I'm going to change their minds about me, but it's like, are you okay with continuing to show up and show who you are? If you're being called a bad person in all these ways, are you okay with putting in sort of the time and effort, because a lot of the time it is a long game, to sort of show that that's not true? I don't know that there's like a easy answer there for any. I feel like that's the thing that people have to wrestle with time and time again, because it's like, where's the line? Again, for something I feel like so many ex-women deal with, is figuring out where's that line to where like no contact might be the healthiest, or this amount, and like there is no answers like set for you. It's just like, well, you've lost your community, you've lost your worldview, you've lost the thing that used to help you find answers, like figure it out. So it is messy. And like when I think back, I don't have Mormon family members, but I was married at the time, and when I think back to how I navigated those situations, so messy. Like I'm just like a traumatized, shrieking child. And, you know, they are too. Everyone in the situation just reverts back to their most childlike, you know, us versus them. Yeah, like it's just the nature of being human, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely good to find like ex-Mormon community, if only online, so that you can know that the things that your parents are doing, chances are, not just parents, whoever it is, but chances are a lot of people will have the exact same situation. And it's not because those people don't love them. It's just so complicated.
Yeah, that is, I mean, this is kind of a microcosm of the whole growing up experiences, which is realizing that like everybody, regardless of your situation, will probably sense in some way that their parents were not able to give them everything that they needed as a child. Nobody has the perfect idyllic. Your parents were constantly there, met your every need, were able to engage with you in ways that were healthy and productive and inspiring for you. Life is messy, and parents are dealing with a lot, and they're trying to provide, and they have these narratives that they've inherited from people even less informed than them, and haven't had time or resources or whatever to properly figure out their entire world. There's just it's all very complex, and I think you end up saving a lot of energy by not feeling like you have to change anybody else in this. Like it sucks. It really, really sucks, because you want your family to be there for you. You want them to be curious and loving and understanding, but most often that's just not the case, especially right off the bat, just because their first instinct is to put up defenses because you've become a threat to their very sense of self. And so if, as much as you can, like just piggybacking on what you're saying, trying to find the validation from other people who are going through the experience, and not holding out so much hope for your family to be able to give you what they are kind of promising, because that's kind of what you realize is you're like, oh, the church is all about the family until a certain point, until you don't fit quite then, and then it's like, well, we don't know you family anything, you don't meet the requirements, and then it's like, well, wait, I guess it was a bit more preachy than it was in practice.
Yeah.
But the love, I think, really does, or most often than not, does exist in some form, and that your family does want good things for you, and they want to have a peaceful relationship with you. Not always the case, and if that's not the case, make sure you set those boundaries. But just knowing that if you can let go of those expectations for them and be able to get the validation you need from other people, and building strong relationships and networks is the healthiest thing that you can do for yourself. Just taking charge of your own emotional needs and not needing, looking so much for family to meet those.
Yeah.
And it's hard when you're coming at a system where the family is everything.
I mentioned before, about having a willingness to show up and be yourself over time, but I want to make sure it's not coming across as me saying, essentially what I want to say right now is like, you shouldn't be waiting around for your family to change. You should figure out what's the healthiest way for you to interact with them as they are right now. Something I see ex-Mormons do a lot is like they will pour their heart and soul into, for example, like writing out for their family why they left, and then their family just won't even like read all of it. Or like sometimes I feel like ex-Mormons put a lot of pressure on themselves, again, because they know that it's a high demand religion / cult, and they know they're going to get rejected, but it's like they'll put so much thought and effort into how they're going to tell people, almost with this, I don't know, it's like you can't control how people are going to react, basically, and it's not on you to have to like
to micromanage people's perceptions of you.
To spend weeks of work writing a document that like justifies your decision to leave to them. Like, you don't owe them that, especially if, just start with a simple conversation and kind of assess how willing they are to listen to you before you do that. Like, because it makes me really sad, like how terrified people are and how much they're so carefully trying to manage how it's going to go and say the perfect thing just right. That's why a lot of people like to write stuff out, which I'm not against. But then it's just
and
like...
often very friendly toward the church initially.
Yeah.
And then when you find out that people aren't very receptive to that.
Yeah. So it's just, you really do need to kind of like gauge at the beginning, okay, what's the willingness here for my loved ones to actually listen to how I feel about this? Like, is there willingness? And, you can't force that willingness if it's not there. And also, I think that ex-Mormons will be too apologetic sometimes because they've got the same lifetime of conditioning as the loved ones. And so they'll be overly apologetic or sugarcoating certain stuff. And I do think it's good to just be like, this is not something that I believe in anymore. I don't believe in the truth claims. If you want to chat, like, I'd be happy to share why. But always erring on the side of just like, this is what I'm doing. I know it's not that simple, and it just sucks that people have to have such like insane conversations that just kind of are doomed from the start.
I mean, it's kind of why we have a channel, right? Is because we can vent and process and say all that we need to say, and we're not waiting for a specific reaction from a specific person. I can just say my piece and get feedback from people who are experiencing similar things, and not needing my former bishop to reach out to me and say, hey, I'm so sorry.
Stop looking for validation from the church and from church members, because people do it because they've been taught by the church for so long that people who leave are evil or whatever, and so you're so desperate to prove like, hey, look, I'm not evil. But it's like, it's a losing battle, like, a lot of the time. You need to stop needing validation even from your loved ones who are believing, because like you don't subscribe to that way of thinking anymore, so it should no longer... It's like the whole your boos mean nothing to me, I've seen what makes you people cheer in Rick and Morty, one of my favorite lines. I think that's in the Heist episode. But it's like, you need to, when you're leaving the church, you are in the process. Just because you've realized the church's claims aren't true doesn't mean you're necessarily like that far. I mean, you are like very far along in terms of disentanglement, in that like that process often can take people decades, but like you've still got a long journey to go in terms of disentangling yourself from the church, not, but it sucks because it's like they're your family members, so it's much more complicated because you don't want to write off your parents if you can help it. I imagine most people.
Yeah. And unfortunately, this does feed really heavily into the angry phase of ex-Mormonism. And of course, in Mormonism, we're conditioned to believe that anger is a bad emotion that you are not supposed to feel, that you gotta either stuff down or let go and forget. But it's a physical phenomenon that we have to feel and let run its course. Otherwise, it's gonna jank up our body from the inside. That's just how emotions work. And it makes it's this weird situation because you have, you come forward with information, feelings, thoughts about church and stuff, and you assume again that the people who profess to care most about this stuff and about you and about, Christian empathy and things are going to be receptive to this and going to want to understand. And rather than being met with empathy and curiosity, you're met with their anger disguised as righteous indignation, and then you kind of feel this like, how come no one cares? Like, this is crazy. Like, we should be doing something about this. Like, I'm telling you that there's the building's on fire, and you're getting mad at me for telling you that when we need to be like helping people. And you feel just like you're made. It is a form of gaslighting. I hate to use that word in this day and age, but...
Well, in this context, it actually makes sense because leaders of the church have gone on a conscious campaign to obscure reality.
Yes.
And convince members that they're crazy. So, like, this is
the literal
which is the actual term, is when not just someone lying, but when someone goes on, like, a concerted effort to make you doubt your own reality. It's not quite the same.
They said this, and they're like, no, they didn't.
That never happened, actually.
That people say that. Sorry, that didn't happen. I'm not aware of it. It didn't happen.
It's not our fault you're so negative.
So it is easy, natural, and okay to experience anger as an ex-Mormon, as a Mormon, as anybody, because it's just a human experience that we all have at some point.
And I think the more you try to, like, repress it, or the more you kind of deny your anger, the more it will come out in more dysfunctional ways.
Yes.
So it's better to just sort of accept your anger and own it. And like on a practical level, like when you're in a heightened state of like anger, movement can be really good. I just read something about how
finishing that stress response
when
cycle.
but when you go for a walk, it can like help you release emotion and like lower your anxiety, because your brain is processing so much visual like information as you're walking. There's something about ambulating. Is it ambulating? Something about being in forward motion that is like really helpful for processing emotions, which could be like on a bike. You don't have to be walking, could be running on a bike, whatever. But yeah, I definitely think it's good to figure out like healthy coping mechanisms to like sit with and release your emotions. I know we're always harping on about that, but it's like that's something I wish I had in my toolbox when going through leaving Mormonism, but of course I didn't.
Right, because when you know, in these instances, when we in Mormonism, and other religions are conditioned to be so disconnected from our bodies and from our just like lived present
and
experience,
emotions, which is
yeah, totally. So, you know, we're kind of learning to deal with emotions for the first time, a lot of us, in big ways. And so it can be easy to feel that anger, to feel unseen, unheard, and need to lash out in whatever form. And there are some ways of doing that. We have a YouTube channel specifically for venting and things. But
don't start a YouTube channel. The market's already too saturated and we're becoming irrelevant.
So yeah, learning how to move emotions and energies around in our bodies so that they're not just eating us up. And exercise is, of course, a great way to manage that. But not feeling like we need to be, targeting specific people, that I have to change your mind about Mormonism, and getting into fueled, angry discussions on Facebook where just,
Yeah. Notice the ways that you participate in the us versus them culture, and the lies that your brain will naturally tell you, that if you could just get this person to, realize this or accept this about you. I mean, realistically, that would provide a sense of relief, if you could just have your parents like listen to a certain thing, whatever. But yeah, it really is a journey of figuring out how to stand on your own, isn't it? And there are like, there's a massive ex-Mormon community, so you're not alone, and there's people you can commiserate with and like learn from and blah blah blah. But you can't be looking to members of the church to validate your experience. It's just not going to happen.
And
maybe
offer dialogue. Like, I've had really good conversations with believers, with.
But I would say if you're really emotionally charged and they are, probably not a great chance that it's going to go that well.
Yeah, if you're finding it very taxing, don't
So
engage.
Speaking of like the journey, it seems like you now are able to have like much more productive conversations with believers, because that emotion isn't there, and you've healed, and so it's not the same energy that you're bringing to the conversation. So you're able to, if someone says something crazy, you can be differentiated and not take it personally,
Yeah.
That's because you've spent years figuring out a sense of self outside of them and Mormonism.
Right. And it takes time.
And it really does, yeah. Like it years.
Yeah. Another thing I want to say is, people will sometimes ask, how do you get family out of the church? And I always say, don't worry about it. If what you desire is for your family to accept you unconditionally and to not need you to be a member of the church, then you have to first kind of be able to offer that to them. You have to say, like, it's okay if you're Mormon. If every situation will be different, and your personal relationships with people will be different, maybe facilitate different types of conversations and things. People have different levels of openness. But as a rule, I think it's just good to not have that expectation that, like, any conversation I'm having, I'm trying to sneak in ways to undermine their belief. That comes across as it's exactly their game. It's very manipulative. That was something I don't like about the church, is I didn't feel like I was able to have authentic relationships with people outside of it, because everything was like, how can I missionary my way into their life? And it's like, why can't I just like love this person for who they are, like religion and everything? And I feel like that attitude, more than anything, has laid the ground for, despite being a prominent anti-Mormon, a peddler of anti-Mormon filth, a spiritual, a niche,
a micro
presence on a dark corner of YouTube. You know, despite my bad rep, I still have good relationships with Mormons.
Yeah.
Because I really don't need them to change. And I don't want... It's like, if this is working for you, that's fine. And me not needing that from them kind of sets them up to be more curious about... Because they know I'm not trying to do anything. They're just like...
Exactly.
They're able to approach me and just understand my experience. And in the recent conversations that I've had with family and friends who are in the church has been really, really, really wonderful, really productive, where I've been able to talk about, this is why I've been angry, because I was experiencing these things and not getting any validation from the people who I was closest to, and able to express that and not in a way that was demanding something from them.
The truth is that people who leave high demand religions and cults are the most threatening thing to like those organizations, because the chances are that you will have some kind of impact on at least someone around you, but it never comes from when you're making a concerted effort to try and get them to change their minds. Like none of us really change our minds when people are trying to get us to change our minds. It's like the backdoor curiosity that will come, or like the just observing you living your life over time, and it's never like the I'm going to change your mind about, because then you're just like playing into sort of debate culture, and that just doesn't do much. This is kind of a going back question. I'm curious how much, when you were going through your faith crisis, how much thinking about the fact that you would be rejected by your family to some degree was in your mind that whole time. Because I feel like for a lot of people it's something that can almost like halt their journey of learning, because you are aware that, well, if I know, there comes a point where you almost know that if you learn more, you kind of have a sense that it's not going to be good. And then you kind of know the inevitable result of that is going to be family rejection. So like, how was that for you?
Well, it's interesting looking back now that more time has passed. I think the culture has shifted somewhat in the last 6 years.
A lot.
Because when I was at BYU, Idaho, and going through my faith crisis, it felt like so taboo to talk about doubt, to talk about skepticism, higher criticism, any of that.
If you
was
brought
totally
up
off
even
the
just
table.
like a tiny thing to someone, like the energetic shift in like
Yes.
the dynamic of the hangout would just turn so weird.
And that's eventually why I stopped going to church, among all the other reasons, was realizing like, oh, anytime I even just put a sprinkle of that out there, it's immediate shutdown. Like nobody is interested in discussing this, and not just lack of interest, but like hostile toward these thoughts.
I think this is highlighting that, like, a kind of a tip that maybe can give some of you hope is just like allow for people's natural curiosity to grow over time. Because chances are, once the dust has settled, because I feel like, again, it's like a bomb goes off when you announce that you're leaving. And hopefully with time, the dust will sort of settle. And most parents don't want to just like never see their kids. Like most people still do want loved ones in their life. Maybe not everyone, but then if you give it time and you don't need anyone to change, then you allow for their natural curiosity to unfold, which is how all of us learn best, as opposed to, like in the beginning, if you say even a tiny... Also, who's experienced the phenomenon of like, when they suddenly know that you're them, that you've left the church, tiny little comments that you could have made as a believer that would have been absolutely fine, that other people in your family might even make, suddenly you're not allowed to make them.
Right.
And suddenly people
You're
are
an
weird
outsider
about it.
now.
Yeah. So people are very sensitive, as you are to them, to like the little ways that you try and, it can definitely be, again, I think if people are open to listening, like it's good to talk, but it can be more powerful to not need to talk.
Yeah, you don't need to pry that open.
Yeah. Either way, you should you should be on a journey of becoming confident sort of in your own skin and with your own beliefs without needing to talk about them with anyone else,
So going back to the point, it seems that things have shifted a little bit, because now every Mormon knows somebody who's left the church.
Yeah.
I
really felt like we were there just weren't that many people.
Yeah, if they did, it was just kind of like I had heard that some people
Yeah.
left and wasn't
A
really
friend of a friend.
Yeah. I mean, when we first started doing Zelf, we were using pseudonyms because it was kind of unheard of to just be like so out there about it. I mean, there's obviously people who have been doing it publicly for a long time, but just...
But even John DeLynn, if you look at how Mormon Stories was, like, even when we left, like, the amount that they felt that they had to pander to believers, because the whole ex-Mormon community is traumatized and is so terrified of being cast as this, like, wicked, dishonest, lazy, whatever it is. Like, you see it in... And so it's cool to see how, like, content has evolved, and now you've just got people, like, being so open and, like, mocking it on TikTok, and that's really good. Like... Now there's less sacred cows, but it used to be like the ex-Mormon community still had to play by the LDS community rules in a lot of ways, or like we saw the ways that would happen
in some ways, and if not, then it had to be very anonymous.
Yeah,
because you didn't want to be seen as...
And I remember when it was like we were like, it was very inflammatory for us to be like, yeah, I am anti-Mormon and like proud of it in a way, because I'm anti like these things, not that I'm anti these people. Like I want these people to be happy and thriving. Yeah.
Which now I'd see as like a useless kind of binary, you know, but
yeah.
But
I think it was a good thing to have
to have gone through. So now we're at a point where a lot of people have left, are continuing to leave, and the church is being forced to reckon with that and to realize like, oh, unless we want to see a ton of our family and friends just cut off forever, we have to figure out a way to live with these people as well. So I've been really inspired by, like, my sister works at the MTC, and she's been the most willing to talk to me and just meet me on a very human level and just like, hey, I want to understand your experience. And I like to believe that that's reflective of a church-wide kind of movement in that direction. She is just a really cool person on her own, regardless, so, you know.
But there's definitely more exposure that people have now to, well, A, ex-Mormons in general, but B, people have been speaking up about, like, don't treat us like this.
Yeah.
Like, these things are not cool to say, or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it's all a weird balance, because we say, yeah, you don't have to convince people, and you don't have to trade, you know, you don't have to persuade someone that you're a good person, but you also don't have to be a doormat, and you don't have to, you can stand up for yourself, and you can explain your reasoning and all that. But there is a certain allowance of other people to or situations to sap your energy and your well-being, because you're so flustered at being misunderstood, mischaracterized, and all that. That's more what we're talking about.
It's hard because, like, when I left Mormonism, I didn't know how to, you know, use nonviolent communication, or I didn't know that people inevitably would react a certain way, or I didn't know they were going to be so unwilling to listen to me. And I also didn't, the thing about, you know, traumatic events is like when you're in it, you don't, you know, perspective shows you a lot, but when you're just like in the thick of it and you're just like, your whole body is triggered constantly, there's only so much you can do. So it's like, maybe you will just, you know, be kind of angry and too tribal in how you converse with believers, and like that's also fine. You gotta have some like compassion for yourself, because you'll learn either way, if that makes sense. So I'm like wondering what advice me 6 years ago could have heard, if that makes sense. It's almost like I just had to go through it. I mean, but then if I would have been able to consume various like media, then that might have been helpful, you know, like just us talking about this, or other people. There's so much now, so I mean it could have gone differently through that, but I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is something I've said before, but like there isn't some perfect way to navigate it, and you probably, there's only so much you can expect from people that are in the middle of like processing this enormous trauma, you know. So which is why I think for a lot of people it can be good to like have healthy distance from a lot of loved ones for a time, and maybe even like explicitly telling them that it's for a time because you need to process, and basically like you should just prepare to have to process. And that wasn't a way that I looked at it at that time. It was like my only goal was just, and I suppose that's why we have this YouTube channel, so it is what it is, but I was just like, we got to get people out of the church, we got to convince people that it's not true. but I wasn't looking at it through the lens of like, I'm going through a massive trauma right now that I like need to heal from and like can heal from.
Mm-hmm.
It was all just so like dark and confusing, and you know, it would have been nice to have more people back then saying that, hey, this is wild, and like this is a lot for you right now, but like the dust will settle and you will figure out how to rebuild.
I think that more than anything is the message. Just allow for dust to settle, allow for you to make mistakes in your exit, to be misunderstood, to be mischaracterized.
Yeah,
even
you don't have to be perfectly graceful all the time. And if you are able to, then it's like it's a gift you're giving yourself. It's not for them. So I mean, it can be, you know, but it's like it can. The reason we share advice of like, you know, maybe learn about some nonviolent communication techniques or don't try to convince people, it's like ultimately so that you'll have an easier time, because the nervous system activation of when you're arguing with a believer, when you're in the thick of a faith, you know, just leaving the church, it's just a lot to deal with on top of what you're already dealing with.
And I'm saying this to myself because I'm not always the most, you know, namaste, nonviolent communication.
No,
like everyone, I'm filthy at times and rude at times, and you know, it's like, but that's it's also just part of my authentic lived experience.
And you don't need to prove that you're some saint for your ex-Mormon experience to be valid. Like, even if you're the shittiest person in the world, the church still isn't making true claims. So, yeah, I think it's kind of, there's a lot of, well, you can't win the battle, obviously, with believers who think that you're a bad person because you've left. But sometimes I feel like people take it on themselves and they feel like they then have to be the most saintly, whatever.
And I find that one of the most, maybe the most persistent, I don't know, and I don't even know if this is from the church, this could go back, you know, however many generations, of just the core belief that at my core, I am a bad person. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. You know, when you really get down into why do I feel this way? Oh, it's because I feel like I don't deserve to be happy. I don't deserve this. because I'm bad. And that definitely has a lot of churchiness in it. But it's something that, you know, in my healing journey, the one that's like, okay, that's at the bottom of it, and something that I have to just allow myself to just be what I am, and that's okay. It's not good, it's not bad. I'm just a person, like a tree is a tree or a rock's a rock. I'm just a human having an experience on this rock.
Yeah. Well, just any time that you're feeling that urge to sort of prove yourself to someone, it is good to go inward instead and try and find that within yourself and realize, like, you know, maybe I do have this kind of conditioned core narrative that I'm bad. How can I challenge it within myself? Like, do I really believe that? Like, you can think about it logically. You can think of ways to sort of reaffirm that that's not true to you. I don't know. What I'm saying is, like, other people don't have to have the power over your sense of self-perception, but I totally gave my power away a lot when I first left Mormonism, because I didn't have other tools in my toolkit. Right. A lot of people are a lot smarter than I was when I left Mormonism. Like, that's, I'd say, probably a majority of people are like now, because I was like a 22-year-old idiot.
There's lots of 22-year-old idiots around.
And it's fine if you're a 22 idiot. I mean, now I'm just a 29-year-old idiot. But
yeah, ultimately, you have to. It's learning to grow up in a way, to take responsibility for your experiences, your emotions, your self-perception, and I think with that does naturally come grace that you are able to offer to people. I've experienced that with family, with friends, of just because I'm okay with who I am and don't need to, because for a while, like, you know, every conversation I was having with family was very stressful, even if we weren't arguing, because we're very avoidant and non-confrontational. We're not going to touch on the really difficult stuff, but everything was just kind of tense, and little comments or little things would, you know, just remind us of our differences and kind of irk each other, and we would get into things and kind of be a little bit hard.
And you're probably each, like, looking for them in a way, because you were all on your guard because you were still hurting. Whereas now I feel like you don't go into family situations on guard in the same way. Now it's like if they say something belittling of ex-Mormons, it might hurt you, but it's not quite the same.
Well, now I could call them out and we'd kind of laugh about it more than,
Yeah, you definitely learn so much is like a learn as you go thing, isn't it? With like, because everyone's, as much as we try and give like generalized advice, it's like everyone's people in their life are different. And so you learn like unique ways for you to interact with them. But then also, I think as you grow in self-confidence and happiness in your own life, that definitely helps a ton. Because then you're not going into interactions with this like gaping hole that you hope that they can fill, but that they're like fully not equipped to fill.
And yeah, and just being okay with yourself allows you to hold space for people to just be themselves. And really, there's nothing more attractive and curiosity inspiring than someone who's just like okay in themselves. People want to be around that type of person. People want to understand what is working for that person and want to know more. Not that, you have to be the light on the hill that, is shining for everyone to come figure out how to live the best life. But there's something true to that if you can hold space for yourself, that space will gradually grow to include more and more people and things. So, figuring out who you are, what you're about, what your values are, where you derive your joy, and learning to regulate your own nervous system, all really important parts of the process.
Yeah. I feel like I've said this before, but just sort of keep learning from people wiser than you. Like, that's what we did, and it helps a lot, because you've just lost a whole belief system, and there's no better way to sort of reconstruct them by like learning from others,
And again, to echo Lindsay Hansen Park, like, even if it doesn't mean your whole family will someday leave the church and you'll have the perfect, blissful, celestial kingdom of apostates family, there's still a lot of potentiality for warm, positive relationships with people of all different kinds of beliefs. Because, ultimately, like, if I meet someone who's like a Muslim or a Hindu, I'm not like, oh, those idiots, I have to like deconstruct your belief for you.
Because
you're like,
it's not personal.
It's not personal. And I think you do get to a point after, years of work and maybe therapy and meditation and, all the good things, getting your life in order, does come or leaves that sense of personalness of like, oh, this is so intense for me. They're just a person, just like any other person, like a Catholic or an evangelical or a Hindu, Muslim, whatever. It's just a person. And learning to connect with people on that personal level and not get so hung up.
And I think growing up for every human, religion or not, involves coming to accept your parents and loved ones for who they are rather than what you wish they could be. Or, I think we all have to, at some point, confront the ways that our childhood hurt us or the ways that it wasn't what we needed. And then, it's obviously anger is fine and it's a part of like healing and uncovering stuff, but it is also important to realize that people are what life has made them. And like, as much acceptance as you can bring, the more the better with that. It's like not acceptance of people crossing your boundaries or treating you poorly or anything, but every kind of adult has to accept their parents for who they are at some point. And I think it's not just an ex-Mormon fantasy to just think, oh, well, if only my parents could like realize these things, then we could finally have the family I never got to have. Like, I just think part of growing up is
see me, Dad,
is grieving the loss of like the family that you're never going to have. And also maybe like what a good relationship between, let's say, you and your parents looks like might turn out to be something very, very different than what you would imagine when you're first leaving the church. And so things that maybe feel insurmountable now maybe won't later. And like, it's maybe part of the beauty of leaving a religion is you can expand your imagination about what's possible instead of always having everything be, in these strict categories and boxes and so black and white and all this dogma and blah, blah, blah. Like, you're free to imagine new ways of doing things. And I think that includes like family relationships. So even if you're super close to your parents while Mormon and they remain Mormon forever, maybe your relationship in the future could be way better than it ever has been before, because you're able to bring more sort of authenticity and love to the table, and that has an effect on everyone. Just like think think big, not in the sense of like, you got to be realistic, but I also think sometimes we kind of get stuck on our grief and we don't allow ourselves to imagine new ways that things could be. Am I making sense?
Yes. I love that. Because it's true, like, we have these prepackaged ideas about what relationships are supposed to look like, especially in Mormonism, where roles are so prominent. But really, it doesn't have to be like that. Mm-hmm. And we can more intentionally create the dynamic that we have with people. It's important to, let go of that, the tribalistic us versus them. Mm-hmm. My family is Mormon. They're all in this camp, and I'm on the outside. I've really had to...
Don't let them put them in the camp. Muscle your way back in if you have to. For some people, though, I'm like, just keep showing up being your funny self at family gatherings, keep being the favourite uncle, and see what happens. Yeah,
if you're able to do it, and you're in the place where that's healthy and all that.
This is all very context dependent.
But what I've realized is like, I don't have a relationship with this monolithic entity that has all my family in it. I have a relationship with each member of my family.
And by you treating everyone in your family as more than their beliefs, I think that's going to get you closer to them treating you as more than their beliefs.
Exactly.
Than, just arguing with them all the time, obviously.
Exactly. So rather than being like, I have to learn to communicate with the family through this veil of Mormon indoctrination or whatever. We have a lot of people who aren't just Mormon, evangelical, Catholic, whatever. Rather than that, it's just, I'm just connecting with this person. What do we share in common? And I'm sure it's a lot more than opinions on what happened in upstate New York in the 1800s.
And something I think about, and I wonder if it's been exacerbated a lot by the internet.
And if you don't have anything, then you maybe need to ask, why am I so worried and preoccupied about these relationships with these people I have nothing in common with? That's the flip side.
Yeah, be mindful of the ways that your brain is trying to prove itself worthy of love or believes that it has to earn it even after you leave the religion. I think that people can probably argue about whether this is a modern phenomenon or not, because I do think that humans evolved to be tribal, and part of tribalism is some set of shared beliefs that generally existed among tribes.
Shared narrative, at least.
Yeah, but I do think that in the modern world, we really struggle. We don't spend enough time with people who are different from us. Or I don't think I do. And I've noticed, for example, my boyfriend's parents live in Montana. And when I go there and I see Trump flags everywhere, there's Confederate flags everywhere, my initial response going there was this is a bit spooky and out of my comfort zone, and what are these people going to be like? But then every time I go, I'm I love all the people here. I think they're completely wrong about so many things, but you can, at the end of the day, a lot of people, even with the most wild ideas, it's that's just sort of the ideas that their life experiences have conditioned them to have. And even if I think they're absolutely insane, people in Montana, for example, are really nice. And again, I'm always in my head imagining the feedback, the criticism I could get, because I realize it's I'm also a white person strolling in who's presents, who's a cis woman and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Relatively normative.
So I can't say that, maybe they are just nice because of that. But regardless, it's there's more in people than just their beliefs. There is a humanity that underscores everything, even with some of the people that I would least expect to be able to get along with. A lot of the time I'm we actually have really fun banter, and even the fact that as I'm saying this I'm feeling I'm gonna get pushback from my fellow leftists I think is interesting, because I do think sometimes there is this idea that if someone's beliefs are that shit, then you shouldn't be friends with them, and I don't personally subscribe to that.
I don't either.
Because I do see people as more than their beliefs, and I think we all have the beliefs we've had because of the life experiences we've had, and who's to say the endless factors that go into someone forming an insane belief? Who's to say how many of my beliefs are unbelievably problematic 5 years through? There's just so much there. I just feel you got to see people as more than beliefs, because our species is learning more all the time, and
learning how little we actually know about anything.
Yeah, and if we just put people into these categories of belief, then all we do is we divide more, and then people double down in their beliefs more, and so then it gets us further away, as opposed to, you know, can you have a little conversation about something where you disagree with someone? Can you have a conversation with people where you are disagreeing but where the love is still there? That's the question.
And I think we're all learning that on both sides of the issue. At least I like to think so. My experience has been that. I know it's not the same for everybody, but it's true that we live in a pluralistic society, and if we want to figure out, like, we're not for the whole, you know, for, or at least since the dawn of civilization, it's all been about, like, trying to force everyone else to adopt our way of living.
Yeah.
This is the one right way of doing things, and you have to do it this way or else.
And everyone always thinks their way is the way.
Everyone
and
always
even
does.
if the way that you do things, like, objectively seems like the most logical way, you really don't know.
Yeah.
Just, like, always assume you could be wrong about anything.
I mean, I assume that there are some people who will have a healthier life in the church than out of it. They have more better social network, things like that. You know, maybe that's the case, and I don't want to make assumptions about people.
Well, that's something I talked about in my last video, where I talked about being a convert. Go watch it if you haven't already. Was like, for me, Mormonism was a step up, and it's like my psyche sought out what Mormonism could give me, and that was helpful. And, you know, I was like a young neuroplastic brain that, you know, for whatever reason happened to, like, then want to move on from that, but, like, maybe some people want, and that's fine.
And so, you know, at the end of the day, we have to, and not to put ex-Mormons on a pedestal like we're supposed to be morally superior or whatever, but hopefully we're all interested in learning to build a world that's not just trying to force everybody to follow the one true way, and that we're a line from, I made the mistake of binge watching all of Game of Thrones again, but
I get you. We're so different in that sense.
Yeah, you've never seen it.
Anyone else in the have never seen Game of Thrones camp, or, like, have seen parts of episodes, or, like, I saw, like, half of the first episode, and it just...
The scale is what's really interesting, because, I mean, even some of the religious stuff, you have all these different religions that are all working, like, they're like, oh, I serve this God because I see these visions and I have these miracles. Meanwhile, there's a different religion that's having different miracles and different visions. That's kind of how it's happening here. It's like, okay, there's an underlying phenomenon that everyone's kind of tapping into and pretending to have a market on that, when they actually don't. Like, it's just, it works no matter what box you put it into.
And sometimes the phenomenon is just, like, classic emotional abuse tactics, and there's not much real spirituality there at all.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people do have that experience in Mormonism, where they just get to a point where they're like, this religion is spiritually dead.
Yes.
Is the best way I can describe it, but yeah.
Anyway, going back to the point of, there's a line from it that I really like, that he says, you always make peace with your enemies. Like, we have this idea that if we want peace, then you've got to be doing everything right and everything my way, and that's not what peacemaking is about. It is there is some compromise, some give and take, some recognition that we have fundamental differences, and we're gonna have to be okay with that if we want to live in peace.
Was it Jesus who was like, even the Pharisees love their friends? Like, it's easy to love your friends, basically. It's easy to love people who think the same as you. But but the real struggle of life is, how much can you widen your circle of compassion?
Totally.
Especially given that you never know what factors went into someone forming absurd beliefs. And I think being an ex-Mormon, that is something you can sort of uniquely understand, because you remember yourself as a person who was trying to be good, having just the most harmful, demonstrably false beliefs. That you know what that feels like, so you more than anyone should be able to cultivate that as a strength in your life that can hopefully serve you in all these ways, outside of just, like, you know, trying to be a good person for your family. Like, we're saying all of this with the caveat of, like, if you don't like being around your family, it makes you feel bad, that's fine, you don't have to do that. We're not suggesting you put yourself in any situations you just fundamentally don't want to be in.
Yeah, I never found it necessary to, like, cut off my family or to be like, I'm not coming to these events or whatever, but there definitely has been some distance, and now that we're all able to kind of acknowledge and see the utility in it and appreciate what we were all experiencing in that, and now coming together a little bit more consciously and intentionally.
And it would have been a tragedy if you would have completely distanced yourself from your family because the synchronized dances that you guys do.
Yeah. Though, granted,
be a
little
waste.
less high production than in years past. But
Yeah.
we'll get there.
Spirits have been lagging. Waning. Yeah. Well, should we end here? Because we have taken 2 months almost off of Sam. And so we're going to be filming the next chapter for Patreon right now. And if you're not a patron...
Can't believe we still have patronage. Thank you so much to everyone who's still hanging with us and supporting us after 2 months
The
off
Sam
the air.
series is so good. I think it's better than our Charlie series. And I think if you're not a patron, you should become one.
P.S. We just got the 3rd one in the mail. Forgot to bring it today, but...
And someone sent us Stephanie!
Yep. Thank you so
This
much.
train's never returning to any station ever. It's just this forever. It's the Jack Whalen train forever, as we keep saying. Well, if you have any thoughts on anything we've said, or, advice for newbie ex-Mormons maybe, or just generally we'd love to hear from
Advice
you.
for some oldie ex-Mormons.
Yeah. Did you leave the church in this? I always am curious about people's experiences back when there was no internet and you were just on your own.
I feel like we're seeing that a lot now of people who kind of just had to leave
Yeah,
and be
quietly.
black sheep or whatever, and now we're kind of like, wait, there's this whole community now. Wait, I have all this
They're
unprocessed
this
trauma.
was my thing. Yeah. And then they see these yuppies on TikTok. It's like, you deserve to monetize your trauma in the 70s, and I'm sorry you didn't get to.
Yeah, so sorry.
Well, thank you for being here. Yeah. Hope you feel loved by us, because you are.
Yeah. Good luck out there.
Good luck out there.
Okay, bye.
Bye.